Serious. Redditors, what is your scary paranormal ghost stories? My house is haunted and I have a 6-month-old baby. Sometimes I would hear footsteps, kids laughing, or doors would open aggressively. But last week really scared me. It was morning and my son and I were having breakfast, and after breakfast, my son went down for a nap, so it gave me time to relax. I put him in his crib and went downstairs to read. When I was about to sit on my couch, I heard what I thought was my son crying, so I went to check up on him, and he was very much asleep. So I went downstairs and I went to sit in the living room, and in the middle of my reading, my son's toys started playing by themselves, and by instinct, I went to my son's room, and when I was about to open his door swung open and I ran in to grab him. He was still asleep. I heard down the hall like a dog growl, and it really scared me, and I've been staying at my parents' house for the past 5 days. I refuse to stay at my house, and my husband thankfully believes me, but we sadly can't move. It was about 2 years ago. It was the week before my senior year of high school started, and I was kind of in a rut of hopelessness. I just felt like nothing was changing or getting better. Well, I was asleep and woke up one night. I had my fan running and it was on high, so it made a decent amount of noise. Well, I felt something in the room. Like a presence that appeared, not physical, but spiritual almost. I just was like, okay, I want to see what happens, since I love this kind of thing, and stuff like this never happens. It then felt like a cloud was placed over my ears, not that I could feel anything, but like something was blocking them. Then all sound stops. I couldn't hear the fan, my breathing, nothing. Then a deep voice, almost demonic in terms of deep and cadence, but not quite, spoke. It was like it was coming above my bed, but I couldn't look as I was on my stomach at the time, and I was worried doing anything major would stop what was happening. It said slowly, "The shadow will dance around the firefly," or something close to that, as it was really late and I just woke up, so it might be slightly off. Then it was like there was a pitch increasing in volume as the cloud faded and sound slowly returned to the room. My first thought was, well, that was annoyingly cryptic. I then decided I was too tired to deal with this at the moment, so I memorized what the thing said and fell back asleep. I know I wasn't asleep at the time, as I remember the conscious awareness that I wasn't asleep as it was happening. And it wasn't sleep paralysis, as I've been through that, and this was not even close to that. I still have no idea what happened or have a clear understanding of what the phrase meant. I've had ideas, but it still doesn't feel like they quite fit the saying. I have a few stories from when I was a teenager. I am not sure what the explanation is for some of these things, but I do believe the people that have said kids are more able to see and accept strange things that happen, based on the fact that they all happened to me around the same time. When I was growing up, my 2 best friends were brothers who lived across the street in a large house that used to be considered a mansion back in the 1800s, when that was the very west side of the city where the people with money lived. For years it had been rented out as 2 different units, so when my friend's family moved in, they bought the whole thing. Their dad pretty much stayed upstairs and we stayed downstairs. None of us ever saw a ghost, but we did have some strange things happen. Occasionally footsteps on the stairs leading from the first to the second floor. Sometimes I would spend the night and we used to play CDs overnight on repeat with the volume low. You could watch the screen to the CD player occasionally do things like someone was hitting the buttons to fast forward, skip back to the last song, etc. I could say it was a mechanical problem, but it never happened during the day. Every once in a while, 2 of the 3 of us would hear their dad call one of our names, like he was standing at the top of the stairs on the second floor. When we would ask him about it, he would say he never called us, and a few times he wasn't even home when it happened, but it sounded just like his voice. The strange part is it was never one of us or all 3 of us who heard his voice calling one of us. It was always just 2 of the 3. The third person never heard anything. When I would walk across the street to visit them, I would basically just walk right into the house. I never knocked. One day, I came over and my 2 friends were upstairs with their dad, and all of the lights were off downstairs. I walked in and made it into the dining room on the middle of the first floor. I heard a voice from below me in the basement that said, "Help me." I have never been more scared of anything unexplained in my life, but that voice was very clear and didn't sound normal. It was exactly what you would hear if you were watching some kind of scary movie. It was just very unnatural. I froze in the middle of the dining room for a few seconds with all the hair on my arms standing on end, and then I bolted for the room at the far end and turned the light on. I remember sitting on a chair facing the doorway, absolutely sure something was going to walk around the corner, but it never did, and my friends found me completely freaked out a few minutes later. The house was strange because it had two places where there were what looked like basement windows, but they only led to strange underground rooms filled with something like sand that didn't lead to the rest of the house. We had no idea what the purpose of that was, so we went into them digging and found small artifacts and newspaper clippings from the 1800s. Their dad decided to do some research on the house and discovered that it had been used for the Underground Railroad back in the 1850s and was so old that he had trouble finding more info on it as he kept going backwards in time. None of us ever had the feeling of something evil or dangerous. It was something we became used to for the most part, though now that I'm older it freaks me out more looking back on it than it did at the time. The strangest thing that happened to me outside of that house was when I was 16 or 17. A group of us went to a nature preserve in the city in the middle of the night. I have no idea why, except that we wanted to think we were all cool. In hindsight, that was not a great idea because gangs used to go through the area and it wasn't in a great area of town. We walked around the park till we came upon a small and old concrete chapel. It was like this odd little building sitting in the middle of the woods. No windows anymore. Graffiti all over it, including satanic type stuff. When we got near the building, I started getting this horrible urge to get away from it as fast as possible. At first I thought I was just being weird, so I kept my mouth shut, but the feeling of danger kept growing, and I finally told them we needed to get away from this place now. I guess how I was acting freaked them out, so we started fast walking away from the building to get back to one of the roads that runs through the park. Before you get to the road, you had to cross this little wooden chain walking bridge over a creek that would sway in the wind when nobody was on it. We got across the bridge and started walking up the hill towards the road when one of the others in the group said, "Do you see that?" We all looked back at the bridge and we could see something. The best explanation I can give is, it was comparable to what the Predator looked like in the movies when it was blending in with the background. We could see the outline of something in the rough shape of a person that was distorting the view of what was behind it. You could clearly see this distortion moving across the bridge towards us. That was it for us. We took off running like it was the marathon and never looked back again. I am absolutely sure it would have been a very bad idea to let whatever that was catch up to us, even though I have no idea what we actually saw. I just know the alarm bells were ringing in my head like we in danger, and I had no idea why. When I was 4, at my grandparents' place, built originally in 1910 and has had a large addition put on and renovation, I was up in one of the original rooms. It used to be reading room. Now being a guest bedroom since my mother grew up there, that's where I was sleeping. I woke up at a very early hour in the morning. Don't recall when because it was so long ago. I saw a tall slender black silhouette peek in through the doorframe. I thought it was my grandpa and was about to call out to him, but then it turned and I saw the hat and the red eyes. I was paralyzed with fear. Couldn't move, then it was gone and I could move again. Since then I have brushed it off as a bad dream. Then this past New Year's I was over there again. Same room, this time my youngest cousin was there with me. At a very early hour in the morning, it was like 2 a.m., she wakes me up really frantically. She was on the verge of crying. I asked what was wrong, and she said that tall man is staring at me. At this point, I'm in fight mode ready to take on an attacker who might hurt my cousin. Then I saw it, the hat man. It was standing in the corner. When I saw it, it turned and I saw the hat and red eyes. Then it disappeared. I sat there holding my cousin for like an hour afterwards and we eventually fell asleep. Scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I have had more experiences than I can count, but the two that stand out the most were one when I was in my early teens, home alone, because isn't that always the case, with just my little dog. We were in the living room, sitting at the end of a couch facing the French doors. I'm reading a book when I notice out of the corner of my eye a large shadow on the wall to my side. I lifted my head and looked directly at it, then watched as it moved around the edge of the room and then out the front door. Only I wasn't the only one watching it, my dog was staring at it too. There were no windows behind me and no cars passing on the road outside the doors to create a moving shadow, nothing that could have caused it, but something was clearly there. The second one that sticks with me happened at my sister's house. It's an older Victorian-style home built in the late 1800s, and we swear it is haunted by numerous ghosts. I was babysitting my nephew, he was about a year old, and I had taken him upstairs to put to bed. I read him 2 stories and was getting ready to walk out of the room when I heard music playing. It was coming from under the spare bed in the room. Absolutely freaking out, I got down and looked under the bed and saw another book, far in the back. When I pulled it out, it was the kind with buttons that you can push as you read the story. I'm like, okay, well, guess someone wants me to read one more. I've never slept in that house again, and more weird stuff has happened since then. I would have moved. Well, it's not me really, but rather my mom. We had two couches in the living room, one right next to the main door and hallway leading to our bedrooms, and one completely in the living room. My mom and brother, maybe 7 years old, were sitting on the prior, while the rest of us were sitting on the other one. So while we were all watching TV, my mom sees something moving near our bedrooms. An all completely black figure that you'd typically attribute to your own imagination. So my mom looks to the side and there's nothing there, so she just ignores it and goes back to watching TV. That's where my little brother leans towards her and whispers, "Did you see the man too?" My mom freaks out, makes us search around that area for fear that someone broke in, but there was absolutely nothing there. Another time, a few months ago, my mom came into my room to wake my sister and I up for school. We have a few small mirrors stuck to the wall, and, when you stand at a certain angle, you can see a reflection of the hallway in them, the same hallway where my mom saw the previous figure. She went to open the curtains when she noticed a face in the mirror. Not all black this time, but rather a girl who looked around our age. My mom turned around and there was no one there, so she figured it was my sister leaving her room to use the bathroom. When she left my room, she found my sister dead asleep and the bathroom empty. There have been a few more weird experiences we've all had, like us hearing my mom's sewing machine turn on while everyone was in the living room, or my sister and I hearing heavy breathing coming from under our bed, but I think those two stand out the most.